In this episode of the Awaken podcast, we're going to deeply explore the journey of creating your reality and letting go of conforming to mainstream narratives and groupthink. This conversation is about freeing your mind and truly thinking for yourself, even when it feels vulnerable and scary and like no one else is doing it. Sometimes you got to be the lone wolf and do the courageous thing in order to bring your dreams to life and prioritize well-being. So we're going to unpack it all. We definitely know how difficult it can be, but also how beautiful it is when you step up and go all in on living in alignment. Welcome to the Awaken podcast,
where we share practical spirituality for modern living.
Join us as we dive deep into conversations about healing and transformation.
Let's go. Here we are.
Here we
We
are.
have our cacaos. We're ready to dive in.
Thank you for tuning in. We're very excited for this conversation. It's an important one, and we're going to start by setting our intention.
You know how we do it. Closing down your eyes,
We
taking
have
a
cacao.
deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Just arriving here in the present moment. What's your intentions for today?
My intention is to remember where it began for me and to share it in a way that will give others permission to be free, to think for themselves, and to unlock more of their own purpose-guided life.
Let's go. My intention is to have fun and to reflect on the past and to tell stories of the journey that we've taken to empower ourselves to think outside the box and create our own reality.
Cheers to that.
Cheers. So good. So this morning, we were talking about doing this podcast and I wrote something on my phone. I'd love to read it. I'll just casually read it off my phone. So it's really a discussion that me and you were having, and then I was just writing notes down from our discussion, and I think it's relevant for today's conversation. So here it goes. We live in a system that uses fear as a weapon to manipulate the minds and hearts of the masses, shaping our perception of reality and influencing our thoughts, decisions, and actions. The mainstream media leverages fear and negativity as bait, capturing our attention and keeping us focused on what's wrong with ourselves, others, and the world at large. The more fearful we are, the more stressed we become. And when we're chronically stressed and overloaded with negative information, we start to see the world as an unsafe place where separation and conflict feel like the norm. Plugged into fear, we operate from our most primitive automatic survival responses, experiencing heightened levels of separation and conflict within ourselves and others. We can get stuck in a cycle of problem finding, feeling like something is always wrong, reacting with stress, feeling burdened, and reaching for coping mechanisms to find temporary relief. This cycle distracts us from consciously directing our thoughts, energy, and actions towards realizing our full potential. But when you unplug from fear and reconnect with your higher self, intuition, and authentic power, the truth becomes clear. You are far more powerful than fear. In this conversation, we invite you to unplug from fear and reconnect with your heart, intuition, and authentic power. When you realize you have a choice to stop conforming and start creating your own reality, you reclaim your power from where it has been lost. Today, we invite you to choose empowerment over victimhood, love over fear, authenticity over conformity, and truth over illusion. Let's get it.
Thanks for sharing that.
So I think a good place to start with all of this is the journey that we've been on through everything that I just said.
Where my mind is going back to is when you and I got together. 18 years ago. And I remember when we met, that was, I guess, like almost the glue that brought us together and made us get really close really quickly, was that I saw in you that you were someone who thought kind of outside of the box. You weren't one to just go along with the status quo, and neither was I. And I think we really recognized that and were like, oh, you're like me. You're not just asleep in the matrix going along like a muggle, you know. You're a wizard, and
We were just
you're
curious.
questioning things, and you're awake, and you're very curious. So then fast forward.
You're a wizard.
You're a wizard. It's not just you, Harry. It's us too, among the muggles. So when you and I were together about a year in, I remember we were in that normal crowd of partying on the weekends, going out to nightclubs, doing all the things, drinking, eating fast food, all of that. And then we started to switch things up, and we would talk about, well, what if we did this? And it began with us going to the library on Sundays after a night out partying. Instead of just laying around and eating fast food, we started going to the public library and getting out personal development and spirituality books. And that was so unlike anyone around
No
us.
one was doing that.
And I think that was, again, a real marker point or a giveaway of we're not really normal.
We're not here to settle either, because we became obsessed on learning.
Yeah. We were very curious, and spiritually as well. We wanted answers.
Yeah, I remember that stage. We were working at jobs, working for other people, and we'd come home and, like everyone else, we'd either make food or we'd order some food, get some takeaways, and we'd sit down and watch television. Then we started to question that. Why are we watching television? Does this serve us?
I remember we would comment on the ads and we'd be like, why are we sitting through this? And it started with the little things like every time the ads would come on, we would mute them.
And this was like 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
And then I remember we had the idea, what if we just got rid of our television? Like, we don't actually need it. We have our laptops. If we want to watch a movie, we can watch a movie on our laptop. We can watch YouTube. We can watch things that we want to watch rather than just allowing the television to dictate what we're watching.
It felt very out of our own control to just be sitting there like a robot, taking in whatever we were fed. And I think that you and I both recognized that we wanted to take our power back and have more control over what we were putting into our minds and bodies.
So we did. I remember I put the television outside on the road with the signs,
it was
like,
definitely a rebellious moment.
free TV, someone can take it, you can have it. And
that was a moment.
Yeah, and we began getting out more and more books from the library and changing what we were watching and the information that we were taking in. That was a moment for us.
It was, because it was about so much more than the TV. It was really taking a stand against the programs.
Yeah.
The programming. I remember we would even say that the TV is the programming box. That's why people watch their programs and they love it, because they don't question it. But actually, there's so much more to life. And also we were realizing how much time we were spending just sitting, consuming.
We were realizing that we were wasting time, and what we were watching wasn't actually serving us. It wasn't supporting us to create our dreams into reality. It was actually wasting our time. So we switched it up. And that was really the beginning of our personal development journey.
And then I remember it just kept on spreading. This awareness was spreading into all different areas. And we started to learn about food and realized that we were eating all of these packaged foods where we didn't even know how to pronounce the ingredients. And we started to realize that a lot of the food supply is essentially keeping people sick.
Yeah, we started to research the numbers on the back of the packets, and we were really shocked and horrified at what we were finding out.
Yeah, and this reminds me as well that at that time, I was dealing with chronic fatigue and digestive issues, and I had a lot of different symptoms that I'd been dealing with since I was a kid. And the only way that I had ever known to approach these medical issues that I was navigating was by going to the general practitioner doctor in my local area and getting medications, whether it was creams or antibiotics or whatever they would prescribe me. And I was not getting better. In fact, I was actually getting worse steadily. And I would go back to the doctor and they would just prescribe me something else and just say, hey, try this. Maybe that one doesn't work for you, but now you can go on to this one and do a cycle of that, and then try this one, do a cycle of that, and let's just see where we end up.
Can anyone else relate to that?
One of the things that I started to become aware of, which was super uncomfortable to be with, was that this person that I was going to for advice on essentially how to heal.
You mean the doctor?
Right. Was not looking healthy themselves. And every appointment that we would have was on average 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes max. And they would not ask me questions about my history, my lifestyle, things that may be contributing to what I was going through. It was just, what have you been taking? Has it been working? No, you still have symptoms. Here's another prescription. And I started to realize that that was another area, just like the food labels, just like the TV, where I was giving my power away to someone and something that wasn't actually nourishing me or producing positive results in my life. And so I started to question that and look at different options. And that has been a whole journey and awakening in and of itself. I mean, now I know so many people who have kind of turned the light bulb on in their own brain by realizing that many of the approaches of the system are not leading to healing or lasting health. It's like Band-Aid level approaches rather than addressing root cause issues and creating transformation.
I think we've been conditioned to give our power away as a society, and we're starting to wake up to that now, and we're starting to realize that we have been giving our power away, and now there's so much more information out there that we're becoming more and more aware, and we're living in a different time now, way different to the time that our parents or grandparents grew up in. We're in a totally different era where information is readily available to each and every single one of us, and all we have to do is do the research now.
Yeah, and thankfully more and more, this is becoming like a new norm, a new option to be, say, working with functional practitioners, to be working in a more holistic and integrative way, to be choosing what you consume, whether it's through platforms like YouTube or Netflix or whatever it may be. We have more control as consumers now. But I think that what we're leading into with this conversation is something bigger, and that is the fundamental mindset that keeps people giving their power away versus being discerning and being a creator of our own
taking
lives.
Responsibility for their own life.
Exactly.
It's huge. Yeah, I think many people don't take responsibility for their own lives. They just give away their power. And I think a part of stepping into being a creator and co-creating your reality, like your personal reality, your goals, your desires, your dreams, the things that you want to create into reality, is about taking full responsibility and realizing that you are co-creating with a higher power. And it gets to be fun. It gets to be magical. And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be challenges within that. Of course there is. But I think when we step into a place of knowing that we're worthy to create whatever it is that we want to create into reality, then we realize that it's on us. Like, there's no one coming to save us. It's really about us stepping up and taking control of our own reality.
Okay. What this is bringing up for me right now is that knowledge is power. And there are so many opportunities to gather knowledge and use knowledge to reclaim your power. Something that I find fascinating is that every single one of us throughout the day have these pockets of time where we have infinite choices of what we could do. And some of us are choosing to kind of be on that robotic autopilot mode. Some of us are daydreaming. Some of us are scrolling. Some of us are listening to podcasts. Shout out to all of you listening to this right now. It's amazing. Some of us are going to be seeking out things like audiobooks, or we're doing courses, or whatever the thing may be. And I think that one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves to reclaim more of our power and turn ourselves into a creative asset in the world is to use open pockets of time to gain more knowledge and be discerning about where you get that knowledge, but be exploring and be open and continue to learn. For example, every time I'm in an Uber, one of the things that I think about is, why is this person listening to the radio where they have no say on what they're about to hear? There's ads, there's negative news, there's some random person phoning in to talk about gossip about their partner that the person listening has no idea about. And then there's another driver in another Uber, and they've been listening to an audiobook or a podcast, or they're listening to music that really elevates their mood and vibe. And I just find that fascinating, how these little micro moments show truly how much choice we have, and over time, how these choices compound to influence our entire lives.
Yeah, well, I think we're all addicted to scrolling at this point. Each and every
Safe to
single one
say.
of us. Yeah. We spend way too much time scrolling. Everyone does. You know, I catch myself in it and think I'm just going to scroll for like a minute just to check out what's going on, see what people are doing on my network. And then all of a sudden it's like 10 minutes and I've like just lost track of time. It's so easy to do. So I think that's a huge problem in today's society. It's like the scrolling has become the new TV, the new advertisement. The algorithm dictates what we're seeing, you know, and as soon as we click on one type of video, then the algorithm is going to give us more of that. So it's like this crazy thing that we've never experienced before. No generation before us has experienced it, and we're in it.
Yeah, it was funny the other day. Julie Parker, shout out Julie, she posted this little story on Instagram saying that if you are having difficulty with the algorithms right now, then here is a little glimpse into what's hot and what will help you get ahead. And then the next story was this reel of all of these different young women twerking on different street corners. And
You mean as a creator? Like as a creator creating content, if you're having...
Yeah, if you want traction,
yeah.
this is what's performing. This is what's hot. You know, do more of that and you'll get more likes and more views. And I think, again, speaking into what you're saying about the algorithm, as a consumer, if you're relying on the algorithm to feed you, then you're going to probably eventually find your way into consuming pretty low-level content.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it, right? Because it's not just the food that we're digesting, it's all information. We're digesting it on a daily basis, you know, and it's cluttering our subconscious mind. It's influencing our thoughts, our behaviors, and actions. And it is programming us and shaping our reality, whether we like it or not.
One of the things that I remember you and I really confronted when we threw out our TV was the targeting toward the more primitive parts of ourselves. And you could call that the lower energy centers.
Or
you
the
could call
reptilian
that,
brain.
yeah, you could call that our primal urges. You could call it the more hedonistic desires. So let's talk about that. What are the things that I feel like we need some kind of tough love and illumination here on, like, what people need to wake up to.
Well,
what are we being fed that we need to get really honest about?
Well, for me, this is a bigger conversation because it goes into coping mechanisms. And I think when we feel stressed or burdened or overwhelmed, or we've been consuming negative information, or just life stresses have been adding up, and all of a sudden we find ourselves feeling out of alignment and reaching for something externally for a temporary sense of relief. Now, that could be our phone scrolling, that could be TV. For a lot of men out there, it's pornography, which is a huge topic. For other people, it could be shopping. For many people, it's staying busy, overworking. You know, there's many different ways that we distract ourselves. And another big one is food, you know, and And this is ways that we find temporary relief from the stress and burdens that we're feeling. But because it's only temporary, usually what happens is that temporary relief wears off, that pleasure, right? That sense of relief that we get, it wears off. Then we're left with the stress and the burden. And on top of that, if we've made choices that feel out of alignment, maybe with our goals or with our values or with the person that we truly want to be, then we're left with a sense of guilt or shame for those choices that we made. And many people are so stuck within that cycle.
What would you say to someone who's listening right now who says, well, I don't really see anything wrong with that? Like what's wrong with me, wanting to scroll? What's wrong with me watching porn? What's wrong with me consuming things that are processed or whatever?
There may be nothing wrong with that for you. Or you may get to a point on your journey that you feel that that's no longer in alignment for you. And there's this inner conflict around the choices that you're making. And when you get to that stage where there is an inner conflict around the choices that you're making, that's because a part of you is out of alignment. And each of us have our own internal compass, and we have to feel into that for ourselves. What's right for one person might not be right for the next person. This is not about like what's good and what's bad. It's really a conversation about what's right for you, and are you living in alignment with your soul? And I think that's all that matters. How one person is living and the choices that they're making may be in alignment for them. It doesn't mean that it's going to be your personal alignment.
Because we've touched on this, and I feel like it could really help someone who's listening, would you be open to talking about your journey with pornography and also maybe things that you've seen, like working with a lot of men out in the world, and how that has been an area of reclaiming power as a man?
I think this is a huge topic. So I work with a lot of men, and I'd say this is a huge problem that most men struggle with, is some form of addiction or coping mechanism when it comes to pornography, gambling, substance abuse. This is a huge topic, For me, it was more emotional eating. I never really had a problem with those things. I did watch pornography growing up, and I read like Playboy, and I was really into that growing up. And for me, it was more just exploring my own connection to my sexuality. And I didn't feel like it was a problem on any level.
You didn't have an addiction to it like some people do.
No.
And for sure, I'm imagining that there are going to be people listening to this who are struggling with porn addiction because it's so common.
It's very common, yeah.
And is there anything that you would say to anyone who is struggling with any of those addictions, like even gambling, porn, food?
The first thing I'd say is, because most people have a lot of judgment around these things, internal judgment on themselves, I would say to recognize that when you feel stressed and overwhelmed and burdened, and you're beyond your window of tolerance, you're reaching for a temporary sense of relief. It's to know that there's innocence in it, that you're reaching for a temporary sense of relief to find pleasure from the burdens that you're feeling. Now, the only question is, are the choices that you're making in alignment with your values, your goals, and the person that you want to be? Or are they out of alignment? And only you can make that decision. And you'll know from how those actions make you feel after you're done them. So for example, if you've been scrolling on your phone and you come out of that and you realize, hold on a minute, I've just wasted all this time, that's not in alignment. I want to be doing other things with my time. If you're watching pornography and it's stopping you from intimacy in your relationship, or it's leaking energy and you realize that you're putting energy into something that feels like it's limiting your connection with your partner, or you feel like it's an addiction for you, it's something that has power over you, then that's something to look at. Anything that has power over you, then that's not good. So that would be my question around that, for the listener to question things for themselves and to come to your own conclusions, because this is not about making you wrong. This is about you really feeling into what is your alignment.
I think this conversation is interesting because it can get confusing or blurry around being the morality police, right? And we're not here to tell anyone what is good or bad or right or wrong. Like you said, every one of us has our own internal moral compass, alignment compass, soul compass. And being sovereign and discerning is about going within rather than just following along with what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. It's about questioning things for yourself and have the choices that you've been making, do they feel in alignment or not? And you know your truth by the way it feels.
Exactly. It's about thinking for yourself.
Mm.
And I remember for you that with a lot of these things, you didn't have an outside role model or mentor who was leading the way. It was something that arose from within as an intuition, as a knowing or a contemplation, and something that you were like, you know what, I'm going to try this. And some things were easy to change and other things were difficult.
Yeah. For me, like stopping watching pornography was easy because it wasn't an addiction. And I just made the choice one day after a conversation with you that this is not something that I want to put time and energy into anymore. It just no longer felt aligned. So I stopped watching pornography. I think this was in 2010, if I remember correctly. And I haven't watched pornography since. You know, I just focus on our relationship and cultivating a good sex life in our relationship, which feels fun for me. Gambling was never my thing, but I saw how it negatively impacted so many people's lives around me.
Well, I think something that's helpful for people to consider is that with addictions, they are something that we feel powerless to.
And most people might not label it as an addiction because they believe that they have control over these things, especially when it's a coping mechanism and it's so normally accepted in society, whether that's alcohol, gambling, or pornography.
That's always a good test. Take a break, see how you feel. And if your system starts to feel uneasy or freak out, then there might be a bit of a dependency that's developed because sometimes they just creep in. I think something that's helpful for people to reflect on is their relationship with different coping mechanisms and self-soothing tools, whether it be shopping or food or porn or scrolling or whatever the thing may be. When we're doing something mindlessly to zone out, what can happen is we can also leak energy. And instead of being in our seat of awareness and creative power, we're kind of, leaking it out. We're leaking that energy out. And look, there's a time and a place to just zone out, chill, and relax. But I think what we aim to do these days, as much as we can, we're not perfect, but is to chill and recover and restore energy with intention.
Well, yeah, it's also recognizing where it's coming from, because if the choice is coming from a stress response, whether that's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which we've talked about in detail in previous podcasts, but if the choice is coming from a stress response to find temporary relief or to soothe yourself, then there's healthier ways to do it.
Yeah, let's talk a bit more about that so that people can start to notice where they might be leaking energy or giving their power away or even living mindlessly and getting pulled into this mainstream soup of energy, and it's like the vibratory hum of the collective that is surviving rather than thriving. You mentioned the stress responses, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn or appeasing. Let's hear some examples of that. So a fight response, how might someone be kind of going mindless, giving their power away in a fight response?
Yeah, well, I think when you're in a fight response, you're perceiving threats around you. That might be from your partner, your children, your friends, your coworkers. You are perceiving a threat. So when we perceive a threat, we're defensive, we armor up, we might snap back, we're more reactive, we don't have as much patience. So if you find yourself in that space, you might be stressed in a fight response.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing this up because what it reminds me of is this narrative that has been around for a long time that inner work isn't manly And that if you're doing healing or personal development work or going to therapy or whatever, that is some feminine, soft thing to do. And what I notice is that when people fly off the handle and have no command over their own emotions, that is weak. That is a weakness. That is someone who has lost control.
Yeah, well, they're allowing the other person to have power over them.
And they don't have any command over their internal world.
Exactly.
So there is a reframe here for anyone who's been questioning if it's masculine and powerful to do inner work. I think the ultimate power is someone who is self-aware and can witness their own use of energy and their own reactions or triggers coming up.
Yeah.
And alchemize that into something more useful and productive.
Yeah, and I would say on top of that, when we're reaching for an unhealthy coping mechanism, that's a sign of weakness, ultimately.
It is. Yeah. I think that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
And I'm directly pointing to men when I say that.
I mean, I think we all do it.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm directing the conversation at the masculine man listening to this who hasn't stepped into a place of working on themselves yet because they feel that vulnerability is a weakness, yet they're reaching for external coping mechanisms to soothe themselves when they feel dysregulated.
I'm so glad that we're having this conversation right now. I love it because it needs to be said. It is pretty weak to be a society that is so easily manipulated through our desires and our inability to sit with discomfort.
Yeah, and dependent on something externally to make ourselves feel okay.
Yes.
And that also includes not feeling okay with certain emotions. If you're not okay with feeling certain emotions and you have to reach for something externally to make yourself feel okay, that's where the work is.
I remember this came up at our workshop in Australia, how odd it is that we exist in a world where people will do essentially anything to not feel a feeling. And a feeling is energy in motion. It wants to move, and every single emotion, as it arises, it's already moving and transforming, and it will pass.
Yeah.
But we're so averse to feeling, and we've been conditioned as a society to feel like our emotions are so uncomfortable and unbearable that we would rather turn to something that's actually destructive and harmful than just be present with the temporary arising and passing true emotion. Okay, it might not be a factual truth like, oh, okay, this is how it is. This feeling is everything. But being radically honest enough to be like, this is how I feel right now, and I'm just going to have to be with it. Instead, it's like, oh, anything but that.
Yeah, a lot of people will numb, run, and avoid how they're truly feeling. I saw yesterday, I was walking down the road here in LA. If anyone's been here to LA, you know that there's a big homeless population, and one man was looking at a bottle of vodka, and he was just sitting on the curb. And I was just watching him for a moment as I was walking by, and he was just staring deeply into this bottle of vodka. And I went and did my boxing training, which was approximately 1 hour. And I came back and he had finished the whole bottle of vodka, like a 40 ounce. And he was just passed out on the side of the road, just fully out. And it made me reflect on this topic, exactly what we're talking about. Like, I have no idea what that man's been through, and I'm not here to judge him on any level. It just made me reflect on people that can't be with their own emotions and how they feel. And for this man, he had to literally knock himself out with alcohol. And I think that's so sad. And many people might not be at that level who are listening to this conversation, but you might be noticing ways in which you don't have control over certain behaviors because they've become this autopilot response of these things that you do. And you're starting to question these things. You're starting to realize that, hold on a minute, these coping mechanisms don't actually serve me. And now you're in the place of discomfort because you're aware that these patterns and behaviors don't serve you. And you have to make a choice to break the cycle.
And sometimes we can recognize what's no longer working, but we don't yet have the clear answer or the road out of it. We don't have yet the formula of the new way of being. So specifically talking about emotions and feeling our feelings, because that is actually the root of a lot of how we give our power away and become very programmable, manipulated, and distracted. What advice would you give to someone who's like, what should I do instead? Every time I want to turn to that thing and leak my energy out, what would you do instead?
Yeah, I think the first thing to notice and to question is, am I beyond my window of tolerance? Am I stressed right now?
Am I overloaded or overwhelmed to the point where I feel like I can't handle it?
Yeah, and am I in a stress response, whether that's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? We each have a different relationship with our stress responses, but just questioning that and feeling into that for yourself. How am I feeling? What's showing up for me right now? What are the physical sensations in my body? And then breathing into the physical sensations, being with the feeling. It's huge.
One of the things that Lucas and I talk about all the time is our love of our morning rituals. We know that starting the day feeling inspired and tapped into your inner guidance is going to change not only your day and your week, but the trajectory of your life. We created the Awaken Breathwork app to give you abundant access to the best of guided practices to help you to align your energy, your mindset, and your physical body for success. If you're wondering where to start, we've created a 30-day mystical morning ritual challenge that's designed to give you everything you need to tap in and start your day strong and feeling guided and aligned. Every week, you'll get a practice from myself and one from Lucas, and they're amazing. I highly, highly recommend that you check it out. You can jump on a free trial. Head to awaken.com to learn more and sign up. Get on it and start your day strong and inspired. The link is below. Big love, and back to the episode. Presence is a great place to start. One of the things that's interesting to note is with the window of tolerance that you're talking about. If you get to a state where you're so emotional and stressed out that you go beyond your window of tolerance, what that means is you're going to go into an autopilot, automatic response. And sometimes when people are trying to correct their behavior, like clients that we're working with, they're wanting to build new habits, they'll be like, oh, I had this idea of how I wanted it to go. And then before I knew it, I was doing the thing. Like I was in a fight response, or I was in a flight response.
No, totally.
I walked out of the room.
That's because these responses are automatic. So they are going to automatically happen. And like you said, you might not realize until after the fact. That's okay. You can reflect on it then.
So what you're saying is to practice self-awareness. And ideally, we practice self-awareness sooner rather than later so that we can catch the feelings within ourselves and the sensations within ourselves before it gets to that overwhelm point.
Yeah, and also just knowing your most dominant stress response. Like for me, it's fight. So I know when I'm in a fight response, it's very easy for me to catch it now because I'm aware of how the fight response shows up for me and the feelings and the sensations in my body when I go into the fight response. And for many people, it might be the flight response. So
right, we may become avoidant. We may want to walk out, leave, run away, become really anxious, flighty. We want to get away from the thing. And then with the freeze response, we, become frozen, numb, stuck. We don't know what to do. Everything feels too hard. We become fatigued, exhausted, tapped out, dissociated, all the things. And then with fawning and appeasing, we can go into a kind of social management strategy where we're giving our power away and we're not being authentic. So we talk about that in other episodes. Specifically, what I want to really land here for all of you listening is that personal empowerment is about command over yourself and knowing why you are doing what you're doing and then owning your choices. It's really that simple. when you feel like you have command over your own life and you're aware of what you're doing and you're owning it, you can do whatever you want. Like your life is your life. We all have our own different unique dreams and goals and things that we care about, and that's cool. But if you are asleep and you're just on autopilot doing the things that everyone else is doing and not questioning it, then chances are that you've probably learned how to relate to your emotions from other people, including your parents. And let's be honest, the generations before us, they were not often given the tools, and that's really difficult for them. You know, this is not about judgment. Every generation has had its own challenges. And for many of us, there's been ancestral inheritance of different coping strategies and certain dominant stress responses. Like some people have anger issues with multiple generations. Some people have women in their family who have been disempowered generation after generation. And we can learn these things from other people and then think it's normal.
Yeah.
And a part of that can go into the roles that we play and the things that we think, that's part of being a woman, or no, that's part of being a man. And we get to question that and decide, well, how do I want to be as a woman? How do you want to be as a man? How do I want to be as a partner? How do you want to be as a partner? And we get to choose. And we get to dial in on what feels good for us.
Yeah, and also, are we living in alignment with the life that we actually want to be living?
Yeah.
Like, do our choices line up with the reality that we want? Like, if we're making choices that aren't in alignment with our goals and we're not getting the results that we want, then that's up to us to pivot and to change that up. I know for me, emotional eating's been a huge one. You know, I've talked about that in previous episodes, and that's something that I've had to work really hard on, is to break that cycle of emotionally eating. Because for a long time, I didn't even know that I was doing that. I was just conditioned into eating without tracking my calories. I didn't even know that I was overeating. I just thought the amount that I was eating on my plate was normal. Coming from New Zealand, it seemed like a lot of people ate like that. That was just the done thing. But I recognized over time that I was eating way too many calories for my body, and I was actually overeating and emotional eating. So when I was stressed in a fight response, or in a flight response, or in a freeze response, or in a fawn response, I was turning to food as a way to self-soothe and cope with how I was feeling. When I had moved beyond my window of tolerance, then food was my first choice. And I know many people can relate to that. There will be many people listening to this conversation now who have been struggling with that. And again, it's about realizing the cycle that you're in. Because if you know that you're stressed and you're in a stress response and you're beyond your window of tolerance, then there's other ways to manage that stress. And we talk about breath work a lot. And breath work is one of the quickest ways, because as many people know, your breath is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. It's an automatic response, and it's one of the functions of the body that we can take conscious control over, meaning we can take control of our breath and shift our physiology with our breath work practice. So when we're feeling stressed, we can start to shift that state. Just by some simple breathing techniques, we can start to regulate our system. And that's a really powerful practice, to know that you have the power to shift your state. It's huge.
I am so glad that we're talking about this, because what I found as a highly sensitive person is that when I'm highly emotional, I'm actually highly vulnerable to being manipulated as a consumer. And what that looks like for me as a woman is, when I'm not feeling good within myself, I'm more likely to, let's say, look outside of myself for something to buy if there's an ad that I'm being targeted with.
Can I ask you a question about this?
Yeah.
So when you say I'm not feeling good within myself, are you referring to like having negative self-talk?
I'm literally referring to general. It could be anything. It could be I'm feeling low energy. It could be that I'm in a bad mood that day. It could be that I don't like how my hair looks. It could be anything. And if I'm not in connection to my practice, then I would be more likely to forget, hey, Hella, you have the power within you to wake up, to transform this, to do something about this. And instead I end up outsourcing my power, which looks like, hey, buy this thing, it will make you feel better.
Yeah, temporarily.
And women are heavily targeted through consumerism to buy quick fixes and creams and pills and clothes and gadgets to make us feel worthy and secure and enough.
Yeah.
And it is a bottomless pit. And so you buy something and it makes you feel a little bit better for like 5 minutes. And then it just, the demand, the need for another thing to fill that hole is endless. And I think a part of waking up and reclaiming your power is to realize that that's the machine that we're living within. That is the system that we're all a part of as a part of Western society. And you need to be aware of it because people use it to sell products. And it doesn't necessarily mean that people have bad intentions, but it's a fact of life that if someone has a business and they know that their product meets a certain pain point and they recognize that there are people out there that have that pain point, they're going to market to that pain point and sell it as a solution. And that solution may last for, like I said, 5 minutes. It might be a Band-Aid that lasts for a day or two. But a lot of these things that we see outside of ourselves that don't bring our power and connection back within, they are just temporary relief. And so like I'm saying, I think when you realize what you're dealing with, you can start to understand that you do have the opportunity to be a more savvy consumer.
Yeah.
And also you have the option to opt out.
Well, yeah, a big part of opting out is your daily practices too, because stress compounds for all of us. And, you know, we've spoken about stress is not necessarily a negative thing, but chronic stress definitely does have a negative impact on our health. So we can manage that through our daily practices. You know, we speak a lot about breathwork and meditation. These are things that we love because they support the release of all the accumulations and the stress. It's like cleaning out the house before it gets too messy, so you don't have to do a deep spring clean. And that's what we would call the deeper therapeutic work, is what we support people with. But the daily maintenance is going to support you so much to clear daily stress and tension from the body so it doesn't build up, because it compounds. And then before you know it, you're beyond your window of tolerance and you're reaching for a coping mechanism.
Okay, pivoting a little bit here. And I want to talk about believing in what is possible versus believing in what's been done and what there's already ample evidence of, because I think this is such a big part of breaking free of conforming and realizing that you are a creator of your own reality. So for example, I know for many of us, we have dreams or things that we're into and that we want to pursue further, whether it be a hobby or a career or to live in a different country or to create something or to give back in some way. And there may be doubts about whether it's even possible.
There's always doubts.
And the question is, why do some of us go on to do those things? And then others of us are like, oh, I would have loved to have done that, but I'm not that kind of person, or it didn't work out for me, or blah, blah types of people don't really get those opportunities.
I think it takes a strong person to go against the grain. And when you're surrounded by people who don't share the same beliefs as you, or they're not into the same things as you, or when you speak about your goals and desires and dreams and the things that you want to create into reality, they're just not supportive at all. And you have no reference of people around you that have done the things that you want to do. It takes a really strong person to go after it anyway. You know, for us, we had to leave New Zealand.
I think sometimes you do have to get out of an environment where there is almost an unspoken agreement for you to be a type of way.
Yeah.
And in order for you to express a new aspect of yourself or to bloom into the next level of you, sometimes getting into a new environment is a great way to do that.
Yeah, a lot of people will defend their limitations. So a lot of people around you, when you have goals or dreams or desires, and when you're expressing whatever it is that you want to create, they have their own limitations and they'll project those onto you. And that might not be coming from negativity. It might be coming from a place of trying to look out for you, making sure that you don't make the wrong decisions and you don't fail. But it's coming from their own programming and limitations. So it's up to each and every single one of us not to take on board other people's limitations, because people will defend their limitations like they really believe that it's not possible to create whatever it is that you want to create. They see it as a fact.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I observe this within myself and then also in clients and friends and community, that we all have our own stories about what's hard or the odds that are against us. And interestingly, I think that some of us defend those limitations because on some level there is a benefit in defending them. And that's a bit of a controversial thing to say. I understand that can be triggering.
No, there's a secondary gain that comes from playing small.
Exactly. And these secondary gains can be very subtle and they're also innocent. When we speak about secondary gains, people can get very defensive and be like, what, do you think that I'm making this up? Do you think I don't want my dream to come true? I would love it if I didn't have this obstacle in my way. And I think it's really humbling and empowering, actually, to ask yourself, if I was getting anything from having this obstacle or feeling limited in this way or being stuck in this situation or feeling like I can't do something, what might I be gaining from it? What might I be getting from this experience?
Yeah, a lot of people aren't ready for that. But the truth is, if you are defending your own limitations, then what you're really saying is that you don't believe in possibilities and you're kind of stuck on things remaining the same.
Possibilities are a great way for us to understand this whole thing because there's always an exception to the rule.
Exactly.
No matter what topic or situation we speak about, there are going to be stories of people who defy the odds and do things differently and don't let their limitations define them.
Yeah, and we all have challenges and we all face adversity, but there's going to be people that face a lot of adversity and challenges and don't allow that to be a roadblock and stop them from moving forward and accomplishing their goals.
So the question is, do you want to be the rule or the exception to the rule?
Can you talk about a limiting belief that's been a part of your story and something that you've had to overcome?
Oh yeah, for sure. One that comes to mind is with healing my skin. So for a long time I had acne and dermatitis and rashes on my face. And I remember that I deeply, deeply believed that no one would take me seriously if I was sharing coaching or any form of energy work or offering a service that was in the wellness industry to the world if I hadn't fully healed that. And it really got in the way for me. And I deeply believed it. And I think what is important for people to understand when you do this work on beliefs is that when we have a limiting belief, often we'll believe that it's a fact.
Yeah, and common limiting beliefs that people might be struggling with are something's wrong with me, I don't belong, I'm not worthy, I'm not enough. These are very common limiting beliefs that we see over and over again.
I'm not ready, I'm not safe.
I'm not smart enough.
So all of that was going on within me and I believed it was a fact. And as a result, I was in a freeze response. And I would oscillate between being frozen and procrastinating and avoiding and not doing anything to put myself out there, and then also going into a flight response and actually avoiding actively and running away from any opportunities, to the point people would ask me, hey, can you coach me? And I would not reply, or I would avoid them because I chose to believe that I was unworthy. And so rather than facing rejection or embarrassment when they found out about the truth that I wasn't fully healed, I might as well just end it now, save myself the suffering, and not go ahead with it.
I see that so often for coaches and light workers and people in supporting roles where they feel that they have to be fully healed before they put themselves out there.
It was
a common
so
thing.
heavy, to the point where I believed that if I had a breakout, that I was just completely off path, doing the wrong thing. No one would take me seriously. No one would listen. The wild thing is that I could be around someone else who has skin that's breaking out a bit, or like they've got a rash and they don't know what's going on with their digestion, or they're on a gut healing protocol or something. Zero judgment whatsoever.
So what supported you to move through that?
So it was recognizing that I was actually giving my power away, and I was being manipulated by these superficial programs, and it was getting in the way of me making a positive difference in the world.
By superficial programs, what do you mean exactly?
I'm talking literally about beauty standards and the way that women can be manipulated into thinking that their worth is based on how beautiful they are. That is how you be valuable, and that's how you get taken seriously and get noticed as a woman. And I started to see that that was playing out. And there was a couple of things that happened. One of them was going to India, and we've shared about that in other episodes, but there's nothing like a good slice of humble pie and seeing people who are suffering with really deep poverty, pain, hardship. They don't have anywhere near the opportunities that we have, to go, okay, you've got it all backwards. Like you're really missing the point right now.
It definitely puts things in perspective.
And that woke me up. And when that happened, that was a part of that kind of dark night of the soul, ego evolution initiation that I went through. If you want to hear more about that, you can check out our ego evolution episode. And it was really hard, but also beautiful, because it invited me into a reality check. And then I was like, oh, this is so silly, and I'm being manipulated right now. And I need to play a bigger game and activate my inner light and be a permission slip for other people who might be playing small because of things like that.
Yeah.
And then I realized that if I could just shine my unique light, flaws and all, I was a presence of healing for people. And actually, people weren't drawn to me because I was perfect. People were drawn to me with my flaws.
Yeah.
And it brought people closer. And I've seen since then that the more I kind of get out of the way with my own ego insecurities, and the more I get into service, the more impact I make, and the less I'm contributing to a world that I actually don't want to create. Like, I want to create a world where people feel safe and loved, and where people know that we're all a work in progress, and that's okay. Like, you can still want to heal and figure out what's going on with you and get better.
Of course, that's a part of the journey that every single person has to go through in some area of your life, because we're all on a healing journey in some area of our life. It's all, we're all on this personal development path, learning more about ourselves, Some people are just choosing different ways to do it. We're each unique, and we all have our own exploration in the things that we're into, but we're all learning and growing through life.
You've taught me a lot about that too. I mean, simple things like even having scars. I would be like, oh, I have this scar and I want to get it lasered or something.
I love scars.
And you would say that. You'd be like, I love that scar. Or scars are cool. And it just pulled me out of the program enough to go, who told you that?
Yeah.
Like, why are you believing that?
Yeah. Well, I think a big thing for the listeners is anything that comes from a place of fear or lowers your vibration and disconnects you from your power is something that you should question.
Absolutely, including narratives around aging, gender,
Yeah.
race,
Yep.
culture, intelligence, education. There are exceptions to every so-called rule that the mainstream has spun out into the narratives that we're all getting fed.
Yeah.
And you got to think for yourself.
Yeah, I want to say that again for the listener because I think it's so powerful. Anything coming from a place of fear that limits you or lowers your vibration is something that you should question.
Mm.
And I think that's a really powerful thing as we come to the end of this episode. What's the message that you're leaving everyone with?
The last thing that I want to say is to be mindful of how things make you feel and also what energy you're generating by being involved in activities, content, conversations, and so on. I think a big thing that we can all relate to and be more discerning of is the content that we're consuming online and the conversations that we're participating, and really getting discerning about whether we're contributing to unity and nuance and getting to know each other and understand where we're all coming from versus blaming and shaming and creating division and separation. It's really easy to get sucked into the vortex of drama and negativity and gossip.
Too easy.
It's really easy to judge ourselves and to judge other people, whether it be at an individual level or even at the level of leadership, how the world is being run. And we can think for ourselves and become sovereign without always pointing the finger and being like, oh, it's because of that group of people that I am suffering. I think that true power is found in recognizing that it's you who gets to free your mind.
I love that. Yeah, at the beginning of this conversation, we spoke about how mainstream media often leads with fear. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to create this podcast, to put our voice out there and share a unique perspective with everyone. So I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity to do this. I want to remind anyone who is a content creator or who is interested in creating content, whether that's on any platform. We all have phones. We can pick up a phone and post it on Insta stories or whatever other platform you're on to inspire, to motivate, to reach people, that you have the power to do that. That you have the power to make a difference and that your voice matters, because so often we'll undervalue ourselves and we'll think that we have nothing good to say or what we have to say doesn't matter. And if you've been thinking that, I want to remind you that maybe that's a limiting belief. And if it resonates, I'm speaking directly to you now that your voice does matter and your unique gifts are needed in this world. So if you've been doubting yourself and holding yourself back, thinking that you don't have what it takes to contribute and make a difference in your community, this message is to remind you that you do and that you are needed, and to share your voice and your unique gifts with the world.
All right, everyone, sending you so much love. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in.
Please make sure that you like and subscribe. Share this with someone that you love who is questioning the mainstream narrative and ready to break free. We'll see you in the next episode.